All right, welcome to Business Power Tools and BizPlanBuilder. This is the opening screen for the whole Business Power Tools dashboard, actually. And the idea here is you can, well, if you have a 14-day guest access, you can do that. But you guys all have subscriptions to this, so you're good there. The idea is you simply log in. It'll remember you with probably using your email address and your password. But it'll remember that for you. So you just log in again in the future. But my background before I got to this whole dashboard toolbox concept was back how many years ago it was. I graduated from college in '79, so that's a way back when. But I got a job at Texas Instruments selling electronic components and just selling electronics basically in Southern California. And then later I got a job working for the Sharper Image catalog as the electronics buyer. So I flipped from sales to buyer because I wanted to see what that would be like. And they liked how I explained the Sharper Image products as kind of a, if you don't familiar with it, was a kind of I think of it as a bright, shiny object, guy gadget catalog. You had a horse race analyzer, rugged titanium knife, all this crazy stuff. And it was all kinds of cool things. Anyway, so they liked how I explained the electronics to the art department. They promoted me to being a catalog copywriter, where I would write the actual Sharper Image catalog copy describing the products. In the path of doing that, I found a really cool word processor in Silicon Valley that I could make a lot more money selling that than I would writing copy for a catalog. That was just a salary job, but I wanted a commission job where I could make more money based on how much I worked and how successful I was. And that was cool. But then, word processors went the way of the dinosaur when the Macs and PCs came out. And there I was in Silicon Valley with some experience selling electronics from Texas Instruments, working for a catalog company in San Francisco, and now selling word processors. And it's something about like a high-ticket item like that. You find yourself selling the same product to multiple people in the same business, depending on their perspective. So you'd sell one aspect of the word processor to the person who's going to use it, and then you'd sell the office manager the benefits to them of why it's going to be great for all their people to use this thing. And then when there's the chief financial officer, you go to them and they want to know what the cost is and how does that work and what's the lease and are they making money on this. And of course, when you get in front of the CEO to finalize the deal, they want to know everybody's going to be happy, the company's going to be more productive, they're going to make more profit, customers are going to be happy. It's another level, another perspective. Anyway, so here I was, making these data sheets. I made a couple of color catalogs full of electronic parts, other things, cards, catalogs, different kinds of sales materials. My company was called Tools for Sales because I figured I wanted to make the sales tools that I always wished I had as a sales guy. Anyway, one day a friend of mine calls me up and says, "Hey, I've got a deal with going with Apple. They want to buy my engineering software to use, in Apple's engineering." And so Apple, at the time, the Small Business Administration had done a survey or a study of businesses that failed. You've heard that, your friends and people will tell you, your that 4 out of 5 businesses fail in 5 years. Well, first of all, I'm going to tell you that's a load of BS, but I won't get into that at the moment. But nevertheless, the SBA did do a survey of businesses that failed, and they discovered that 60% of the businesses that failed had no business plan. So there's one little handy factoid to use here for why this is a good project to take on in writing a business plan. Anyway, knowing that, Apple wanted to see my friend's business plan because they figured they needed this guy to be around to develop the product, to support them using it in the future, and well, all that. So they wanted to see his plan. I didn't know anything about business plans, but I did know about selling a product at multi-levels in a company. I knew about electronics, so I knew what Apple was up to, and I knew about catalog copywriting. So I looked at this business plan project as a glorified brochure to sell the business concept to Apple in this case. I knew that there were people in the company who had different responsibilities, different perspectives, different biases. We couldn't go with it. The plan had to stand on its own and be the thing they could all look up. And I designed it kind of like a catalog where it's indexed and the people could go and find the exact parts that they were interested in looking at and get the information they needed. I also learned from the Sharper Image catalog that you really wanted to give people all the information in one place so they could make an informed decision without having to constantly do research, keep calling up and asking questions, just give them everything they needed. Long story short, the deal worked. So over the next year or so, I was helping people write business plans, basically kind of a pitch doctor for business plans and investor pitches in Silicon Valley. And one of them, was Cardiac Mariner, got a substantial investment from Kleiner Perkins, which is the biggest, or one of the big VC firms in Silicon Valley. So we knew we were on the right path. Anyway, what I saw over that year was, there was a lot of people with some really great business ideas, or just some great things that the world needed. So I know you guys are doing things where you're really helping people in the world. And so I'm thinking, how can I help someone like you who's got an idea or a concept, and you're putting in the effort and everything to save the world, change the world, make the world a better place? How can I help you wrap a business around that? And I also saw along the way that these business plans had a fundamental similar structure to them. There's an ongoing, and I'll show you this here, and you'll see it in the menu tree of the business plan. But anyway, so about a year into this, I'm thinking, if I see one more lousy business plan, I'm just going to go crazy. Why don't I just take all of my content that I've developed for these people, and of course redact anything proprietary, and put it into a Word document and sell that as a template that people could do this themselves? Because it's really important that I find that if you write the business plan yourself, you'll know all of the ins and outs of it. You'll know all the plumbing and wiring of your business. You won't be that person on the Shark Tank where they ask them a simple question, and Damon John or Mark Cuban or one of them will say to the floundering contestant on stage, "Do you have a business plan?" Because they know if the person had a business plan and had written it, they would be able to answer all the questions to get funded. And talk about an unnecessary roughness and delay of game and an unforced error to not be able to answer the investors' questions. And because we can anticipate them, and it's been 30 years, and we've baked in a lot of things to these business plans, and I'll share some of those ideas with you as we go along. Anyway, so we followed up, so that this template became BizPlanBuilder. I added spreadsheets to it later and other things, and I started hiring people, and we added Marketing Builder and Publicity Builder, which had a bunch of sample press releases, and I'll give you a quick overview of the whole thing here, but we'll focus on the business plan ultimately. And then we had Employee Handbook Builder and Safety Plan Builder, a bunch of sample agreements, and all these spreadsheets and other documents and letters and all kinds of stuff that you're just gonna need in your business. Anyway, so ultimately I had about 10 products in about 3,500 stores, doing about 12 million in sales, and I had 30 people. So I've been down the road that you guys are on, and ultimately what I wanted to do was build all of this into one menu-driven online dashboard that everything worked together, worked the same, could be used over and over again, and was completely 100% flexible where you can customize it any way you want. And that's what you're looking at here. Ultimately, this is our latest rendition of this. And you can see there's these panels here. They all open up. They're kind of fun. I'm doing this on Zoom, so it's going to be a little slow on Zoom than it's going to be in person. But this front panel is kind of like a business model canvas, but modified and I think much more in depth, because the business model canvas, you might click on something and look at the competitors and, well, okay, who is that? But there's really no depth in the business model canvas because it just doesn't have all of this documentation in it. Now, for what it's worth, all these documents have this green text in them because that's as if we're sitting next to you giving you hints and clues and stuff, but you can turn all that off. And of course you can click this icon here to edit it, and this icon here for filling in the blanks. I'll show you more of that later. But here's this one panel. We have the business plan panel here. They all look fundamentally similar. We wanted to make this be consistent so you could find what you're looking for quickly. You can see there's a kind of a to-do list thing over here where you can put in things just to remind yourself under the business plan category. There's the business plan itself. We'll circle back to that in a second. There's news and blogs. There's some Excel-based financial models. These are completely flexible. You can add your own to these. You can add these, there's worksheets in here. Every time you see a plus sign, you can add your own document. So we've got a business startup checklist. So there's a lot of interesting stuff in here that you might be able to use, or at least, it's help you get started, make sure you don't overlook something. And then we've got an investor presentation down here, which is a pitch deck, and I'll show you that when it loads up faster. We've got a whole handbook of business planning down here, which it's kind of like, the documentation that goes with it, but you want to understand, like, what do you need to know about investors? And what do you need to know about, pitching friends and family? I find that I've pitched VCs and raised money, angels and raised money, Citibank and got a giant line of credit at one point, other lenders, but mom. Selling to mom and dad, it can be the hardest, So that's doable, but that's off where people go. But I want to say that could be one of the harder ones to do. We include a CRM system that's part of your subscription. You guys have access to the finance section of it here, and we have investor communication templates, a whole thing here on stock options if you're going to offer stock to your clients or to your investors, a way to keep track of your shareholders with these different stock option tracking worksheets and things like that. Anyway, so there's the HR stuff for future, legal, management tools, marketing tools, just to show you that there's different stuff. You can see things changing here on the screen, but the idea is there's consistency and there's a lot of stuff in it. And so I'll come back to the business plan because that's what we're going to dwell on today and talk to you about. But first, let me show you really I'm looking up the upper right here where let's get into this. You want to set this up first. We get to my account and it says manage account. You want to click that. Of course, your name and password will all drop in here and you can change that. But we go to my company and this is where you're going to fill in. This is really the first thing you want to do because when you open up the business plan or any of the documents, this information, if it's called for in that document, will automatically appear. So it'll save you a ton of typing, if nothing else. But it just gets it all in there for you. And what we do here is we give you a couple different company name ideas. The first one is your company legal name. The example I use, although it's not what I've typed here, the example might be Ford Motor Company, Inc. Okay, so your company legal name is going to be at the top of your plans, top of your documents, in all the places where the legal company name needs to be there. But throughout the document, instead of saying at Ford Motor Company Inc. we do this, at Ford Motor Company Inc. we do that, you just say Ford. Ford does this, Ford does that. So hopefully that makes sense. We just wanted to give you these two different versions of it. It could be your acronym, it could be whatever you want to use, but you put your company full legal name here, and then whatever the slang you use to refer to your company is in this one. The rest of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory, but down here, we want you to be able to put in your own logo. So you can browse here, add your logo to it. This tagline below here is what you see appearing up here, and that will all automatically change for you. And you fill in the rest of this, and you're good to go. And then down here under Managing Users is another piece of this where this particular example shows I've got like one user and 6 additional people. Right now, we are charging a whopping $1 a month per additional person. But the idea here is you can control who it is, of course, and it could be a generic thing, but in this case it's an individual person. Now I've given this guy, I can give him access to a whole bunch of stuff, but here I've said, okay, like in the business plan, for example, this person can be the business plan administrator, or they can be the reviewer, or which means they get read-only access, or they can be the editor of it. So we want to be able to select the role so you can let people, if you add a bunch of your people in your company, I think people should let their employees and all your team see the business plan, at least read it. So give them read-only access to it at least, and then you can let certain people edit it. And each one of these products can be controlled that way. So you can have an HR person who manages the employee handbook, but everybody can read it. Likewise with marketing and management. And if you come back to the home page, you can build this out. So my theory behind all of this is simply, I think everybody in the company should be able to sell the product or service. So you want everybody knowing what's going on. It's been a long time in a bunch of businesses I've worked with where the right hand knew what the left hand was doing. And that was really, kind of crazy making that the right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. How is that possible? How can a company work together? And the other part really where the business plan comes in, I think it's very important, is that, if you're the kind of CEO who keeps all the ideas and keeps it to yourself in your head, you become the bottleneck. You're not really empowering your people to work for you. So I think really if your team is clued in on where you're going, what you're doing, what the big picture is, who knows when somebody's out and about and they see an opportunity, they hear of an opportunity at a cocktail party, they think, hey, that would fit our company. And so you could bring that home to the business, and that could be a cool thing if you knew what everything the company was up to. So I'm a real big fan of including everybody in the business. So here you can see a lot of the things came from the other field automatically filled in. And of course you can see here, you can write over them if you want. And this happens to be a cannabis business plan. I picked cannabis just because I guess it's so taboo, but it's suddenly legal. And a lot of people, it's become a huge business. So it's quite popular. You can add new founders to this. Just add your people in. I'll show you where they end up in the plan in the future. We have this line here. This is one of those sentences. We just had to kind of, show you how this in context, this phrase would be used, because people would try different things. And so, throughout your plans in different places, you might say, we are in the XYZ industry. Well, I wanted you to have it be able to write something in plain English, so this would automatically insert that throughout your documents as well. So we are in the blank industry, so that way you know what got the idea of what to put in there. We have a number of different templates you can start with and use. This one happens to be, well, medical related. The subcategory really is the distinction between a product or a service, and then the template is the specific template that we're going to grab from to use. Now, a lot of them are very consistent because the plans are similar, but there's certain aspects of different industries where we're working on stuff to make it more specific, more useful that way. But you'll get the idea of how this all works. So that done, save and next. And now we get up into this is the actual, I'm going to close this up a little bit so you can see it used to look just like this, where we had the main categories covered. And then we broke them out because we wanted to be able to give you the control of each individual section. So you could say, okay, let's talk about the company structure and which parts do I want to include. When you check a box and you go to export it, the checked sections will be exported. Although I'd like to convince you, if I could, to keep the business plan in the system, because when you export these, which you can do to Word, you'll have, I use Dropbox myself, but in Dropbox, I could have, Burke's conflicting copy with Ron's conflicting copy with Sam's conflicting copy, and and that's part of the craziness we're trying to avoid. So if you have one copy of it and you have it here where everybody can access it, you guys could get together on the phone. You could consult with other people. You could come in and work with them, and you could look at this and make changes together and go forward with this thing. And you could make a deal where you say, well, if I change this from, it's going to be flea bite sufferers. The way this thing works is it's super easy to, I don't type well in front of people, but anyway, you can just edit this thing. It's ready to edit right away. You can see the editor here. It works just like every editor you've ever seen. You can see some kind of editing, because company's got a plural name. I'm going to have to do a little editing right there, but you can see that's the company name is dropping in everywhere it needs to go. The cannabis essential oils industry is growing rapidly, so to speak. Business Power Tools, the company again. You can see cannabis essential oils down here again. So we're filling this stuff in. Now, while we're here, just to show you, these will typically open up, sometimes they'll just open up blank. And they open up blank, and what you do is you go up to template up above here, and this is where this template is. And what you do is you click add this template to your business plan, and that will automatically drop it into the content window, and it will fill in the cannabis essential, well, whatever you put for this here, your industry you're in will automatically fill in. Your company name will fill in. So, you've got that, or you can leave it blank and fill in whatever you want to say. I recommend starting with our template because we've got some of these headings in place. We've gone to a lot of effort and research and experience over the years to explain and put the headings in. So when you show this to an investor, they're going to be able to find what they're looking for. So they can open up this and say, show me about your customers, and click that, and you're going to get who are your target customers. Now, we did leave a lot of green in here because the green text is, again, more explanation, but we also offer an explanation up here at the top, which explains, tell me more about this whole target customer segment, if you would, please. And so you can do that there. And then, but I would, what you're going to do ultimately when you finish editing this thing is you're going to delete the green, because you're just going to edit the black text and go forward from there. Now, what we've done is it's overkill. Could you mute your speakers, please? anyway, so what you can do here is you can go in and say, okay, we've got, maybe you don't do homemakers, just pick something and just delete. So the first pass through your business plan, I would say, would be to go through it, read it, look at paragraphs. Some paragraphs are similar, like company structure, for example. We've got legal form of business. Okay, well, what's your legal structure going to be? You can see we've got a C corp at the top paragraph, an S corp, L. You're not going to use all of these. You're going to say, okay, I'm not going to use any of these. You're going to delete all of them but one. So, but you've got the paragraph for the one you need, and we've highlighted the one you're going to use. And so that's what's going to happen there. So anyway, you can see how that goes. You just delete stuff you're not going to use. So you're paring it down in your first pass as you learn how the whole thing works. And then there's, what else can I show you something else here? Then there's a place called, the explanation, I showed you that. Notes. Notes are kind of like a side comment where an investor could be reading your business plan and saying, hey, what are you talking about here? And it's a sort of a note on the outside. So these notes can gather and you can come along and find them and address those. And then each section also has a video intro, which is me explaining to you, like, okay, what are investors and lenders looking for?
Market stability. This is the part where you're going to show. I'm thinking where your investors and lenders, they read the news, they watch TV, they get their internet downloads on things, so they know about market volatility, especially if they're in the space of your business. They're going to know something about your marketplace.
I won't dwell on that, but you can see this one's 2 minutes and 10 seconds long. They're all anywhere from a minute to a couple of minutes, to 5 minutes long. And one of the things we've done, that's kind of cool, I discovered, this is a relatively recent phenomenon. You can see this infographic here. Well, what I recommend you do is you go online. It's a simple place. You can go in and get the image for it, all this cryptic stuff. But you go online and you go to Google and you type in infographic image, and then like I get explanation here, infographic image, and hang on where it is, and keyword, 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 and what happens is you'll get a whole page full of these infographics. And all you do is you right-click the infographic, and it'll tell you, give me the source key. Here, let me click on it actually, I'll show you what I mean. You saw it before. It'll say, give me the link to this graphic. And you copy that link in here, and poof, you've illustrated your business plan with some credible, interesting, useful, colorful graphics, images throughout your plan. And I did one like this, look kind of like this, where it was for a in-home elder healthcare company. And we typed in-home elder care infographic, and it got a whole page full of this, and we illustrated the whole plan with those things. And it just adds a lot of credibility, certainly a lot. And this is your market research, because I've had people call up over the years and go, how do I do market research? Well, this is the best shortcut I've ever seen, and it plugs in here and it works beautifully. So there's that. And so there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. You can open up each one of these sections and look at all the fine points of it. And without being, it is a lot here. I don't want to say it's overwhelming, but there's just a lot of things to consider. And some things you just won't use. So I don't expect you to use the whole thing. I just, use the parts that you need. But at least here's some ideas here will give you really a thorough overview of everything that you can possibly, but 99% of everything you can imagine doing with your business, certainly in this past to show investors. And by going through it and thinking about it and looking at these infographics, you're going to be able to answer all those questions. So that's really the main part of the narrative. And of course you can go, you can export these. Excuse me, I'll click the export button here. You can create the narrative, only exports it to Word. You can create the reports for the financial models, and you can create the whole thing. But let me quickly show you the Financial Wizard as an option here. I'm a semi-fan of Financial Wizards, partly because they're structured and they work really well. You just fill in these different things here, like what kind of business are you, whether you're nonprofit or whatever. These little booklet things will give you the idea of the instructions of what to say, so you can just wave over those. And then you can fill in like the revenue assumptions. I already have one product built in here since we are the Cannabis Club business. The product is called weed. So we called it weed. And so the first month sale happens in January. There's the months to collect accounts receivable, in this case 0, because people are paying cash. But you might have 30-day receivables or 60-day or whatever. Some big corporations seem to take longer than 90 days, but we're not really doing accounting here, but we're just getting an idea what the cash flow is going to look like. And so we say this is how many units we think we're going to sell in the first 6 months. And after that, what's the percentage increase? Because we don't want you to have to figure out all these numbers, because at some point you're just making stuff up. But these are assumptions about what the increase might be, what the sales price per unit would be, the cost per unit is going to be, and if you're going to pay a commission to somebody, what percentage is that? What percentage might be returns and allowances? So it pretty much covers all the bases on this whole thing. But you can go back and you can add, bounce back here, if you wanted to add more, you can add really an unlimited number of revenue types in here. I caution against adding too many. Part of the balance is, one, you want to be impressive. Look at all these profit centers and product lines we have. On the other hand, if you have too many, it's going to be overwhelming to a lender or investor, and they'll start to think you're not focused. You're all over the place, and that starts working against you. So I would keep it to about 10, if you can, because that's really what you want to do. And so let's see, what else am I going to tell you here? Okay, so that's so then you go down to HR. You put in your HR assumptions, and there's ideas in there for you. And you're going to add people. So let's say the CEO is Alan, salary's $250, starts in September, and you can add all these people, and you can even make up more people. And you just fill this in throughout the whole thing, and you'll get a financial model that ultimately, come on, clicking, oh no, back to the business plan. I shouldn't have skipped out of that. Financials, reports. So now you can see what the balance sheet would look like, what the income statement's going to look like. It's a little small, but these will all ultimately, you get cash flow, capital expenditures, all the stuff you're going to need really here. And then of course you can export these out. So that's that part of it. But let me show you over here too. If you're an Excel person, you might like the Excel better than the other one, because this allows you to create pages, add pages, put stuff in, and basically customize it any way you want. So you put the assumptions in. I just want to show you the ideas that I like to think they're pretty, without going over the top and making them look like with all kinds of colors and stripes and backgrounds. That's just crazy making for somebody looking at this. The beautiful spreadsheet, I think, is with the one where it helps the investor or the lender find the number they're looking for. So you can see how many units you think you're going to sell, the price point, the cost of goods in this case. The blue numbers are all variables, the black numbers are the calculations, and you can see we've allowed for years growth throughout. And then you put in your different things here in sales and marketing. What's your startup month going to be? Is it a fixed monthly expense, or is it a percentage of revenue? You can do one or the other, and we tell you that out here so you can see that. So there's a lot going on in here, but this really is putting together all the numbers for your business. And if there's something like you're not going to have licenses and permits and office and payroll and pest control and postage, I recommend that you hide these rows. Don't delete anything, because you could mess up the math. That's just a spreadsheet issue. But but it does. I just say hide them versus delete them, and you can do that by simply going up under formatting up here. It works a lot like Excel. And then you get down to the capital investments, some of your balance sheet things. And there's consultants in part of your class. You can call upon people who can help you understand and what to do with some of that stuff. But maybe it's zero if you got a startup, so that doesn't even matter. But we also have a wizard baked in here for different kinds of loans. So you might get a short-term loan. And again, if you see this little blue thing in the corner, you'll see we've added little post-it note like pop-ups to explain to you, like, what does this mean? What are we talking about here? And so these would be like, you put the date the loan starts, how many months it's going to be, the amount, the interest rate. It automatically calculates the payment. And that's all going to show up out here in the income statement. So you'll see the cost of goods sold. You'll see that financing bit down here, interest expense starts adding up. If If it's going out, it's going to turn red on you. So if it's upside down, you're going to see red numbers. And that's just, so you see them obviously, but we want you to be aware when something goes negative. And you can see the first part, the sales projections will project units and revenue. And then there's I'm kind of bouncing. You can see there's tabs across the bottom here. You can put in the different kind of assets. This is for depreciation purposes. So if you buy a truck or something, or you invest in an office of build outs, you have that baked into it. And then there's a break-even analysis that will show you where this thing breaks even. A graph will appear over those numbers at the bottom as soon as this thing gets past zoom. The balance sheet's in here. There's a cash flow analysis. Again, the red. Obviously, this model's not filled out, but it's showing you in red. So there's that. And then there's ratios. This is one of those things, where you're showing your numbers, the venture capitalists and the young guys with the MBAs whip out their calculators and say, okay, let me see if this makes sense, because, for example, the example I give you is like, let's say, and this is actually calculating the numbers off your system, but this BizStats column right here, BizStats is one of these online sites where you can find, statistics for, like, let's say you've got a car wash, and your car wash is doing $1 million a year. Well, there should be a certain number of employees, there should be a certain percentage of profitability, a certain, all these different numbers should be what a car wash should be expected. So the bankers, the lenders are going to look this up, and they're going to compare your trailing average here to what the BizStats are. And if that's different by a certain amount, this will tell you how far off it is. And if you've got a number that's in bright red that's really out of whack, well, you may have a reason for it. So you just need to know what that reason is, or you better have a good explanation. And so either way, but what we do is we give you the computation of how we got this number. What does this mean? This is revenue minus accounts receivable plus inventory minus accounts payable. Okay, that's an accounting class there, but it's you can, when you see it, you'll understand. But here we put in the interpretation. So what does it mean? This thing's way off. What is that all about? I don't expect you. I'm just giving you a tour where it's at. I don't want to freak you out with, like, oh my God, look at all this stuff. But you know what? When the time comes, you'll be really, really, really happy you have all this stuff in place, and it automatically calculates. So it's going to make a lot of sense, because this is, I presume, you're building a business. You want to go to the big leagues with this, and whether it's this business you do this time or the next one, you'll be ready for it. Sensitivity analysis. This is one of those things where the banker is going to say, well, do you have a best worst case in this thing? And so rather than having what other people do, is they expect you to do this 3 different times, basically. Give me 3 different sets of financials. I think personally that's insane. Why not just take the planned version? This is what it shows. This happens to be year 5, that's basic. You can change it if you want, but usually show me at 5 years what this thing's doing. And then, on a bad day, you're only going to do 70% of what you think you're going to sell. And we're not trying to make the sales by every single product, just sales in general, 70% of what you think, and you think is 100%. And on a good day with the tailwind hitting the ball out of the park, you do double that. Okay, nice. That's what that number is. So you just follow that concept down here to cost of goods, down here to your operating costs, like sales and marketing is more or less, research costs more or less, blah, 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 blah. And you get down here to what these things turn out to be. And here's what this, so in the worst case scenario, everything goes wrong, you're in the hole $5,000. If everything goes great, you're at 115. Well, it's not going to be any one of those 3 scenarios, but it might be a combination of them. So we put the weight in there and say, okay, well, it's 30% probability of being the worst case, 50% of what I said it's going to be, and on a good day, 20% could be better. And we do the math, and you come out with a believable number. You could show this to an investor, and they could tweak it back and forth, and they're satisfied. They say, I want to earn 40% return on my investment year over year, and I believe that your company is worth, the value is 10 times what your revenue is, or what your profit is, I should say, price earnings. Price earnings PE ratio is the price of the company divided by its earnings. So if you've got a company that's earning $100,000 and the PE ratio is 10, that means the company would be worth $1 million. Does that make sense? So $1 million company would be doing $100,000 in revenue because its PE is 10. It's really that simple. when I first looked at stocks and they talked about that. Oh my God, what does that mean? No, it's that simple. So that means if they put in $150,000 in year 5, they'll get $253,000, and it'll be 1.69 times what they invested. This is just a scratch pad, just for, if you're going to talk to an investor, you can have that in the back of your mind, is you get a sense of what the value of this of your business is. Because invariably, at some point, if an investor is going to invest money in your business, like let's say you could convince an investor that your business is worth $900,000, just to pick a nice juicy number, $900,000 or $9 million, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, $900,000. They invest $100,000. Well, your $900,000 plus their $100,000 is $1 million. That means they own 10% of your business. They get 10% of your stock, right? Now, the reason we're having this whole conversation, and the reason you subscribe to BizPlanBuilder, is because you want to make a better case. I think, let's just say, take that $1 million example. What if you could make a case that your business is worth $1.9 million instead of $900,000? Well, obviously your business is worth $1 million more, but the good news is when they give you $100,000 on $1.9 million to make it $2 million, they only get 5% of your company. So this drill we're doing here to put together this business plan, this presentation, is to convince investors the whole case you're building with the whole narrative I showed you with the infographics and all the explanation and the numbers you build into this thing all boil down to this one laser focused answer, and that is the question, what's your deal worth? So if I give you $100,000, what percentage of your company do I get? I need to believe that your business is worth $1.9 million to be satisfied with getting 5%. Otherwise, I'm going to want 10%, or I'm making these numbers up, but keeping the math sort of simple. So the idea here is to have a valuation number based on all these there's different methods. Harvard has this formula for this, and there's a discounted cash flow method, and you can see if you can click any one of these, you can see what the formulas are, but God forbid, I'm not going to try to dazzle you with that right now. But suffice it to say, it automatically calculates these numbers for you. And this, again, is another one of these weighted kind of deals here where we explain to you, okay, look, this is going to, which one of these ways is it going to be? Then, of course, there's a VC method that they use where it takes in presuming your price earnings ratio and all that. Anyway, and then we average all of them out. So you've got these different valuation methods. We average them. You can show this to investors. This helps you. It's a sea of numbers, I know, but you could get a sense of this. The VCs will understand this. A financing consultant maybe helping you raise the capital will certainly understand this. But you need to know that this thing is worth, what the value of it. So you look them in the eye and say, I think it's worth this. And if you need to show them the math and do all that, you could. So that's kind of, taking you out to the end. We have a competitor that has a thing where they, hey, grab the graph with your mouse and drag the graph to make it look like the way you want it to look like, and it fills in the numbers. I hate to tell you, but what's going to happen is the investor is going to say, how exactly did you arrive at that number? You don't want to tell them you grabbed a graph and put it in. I was on a business plan competition. Let me tell you this, or I'll open up this other model because this is a beast, but this is the one for venture capitalists. The last one I showed you is the much shortened version of this one. But so what happened was all these different classes, these school teams were doing this business plan competition, and everybody came at the end of, they said, everybody said, we're going to do $1 million in the first year. We're going to sell $1 million in the first year, and every one of them said the exact same thing. And so there's like a half a dozen of them. And one of the breaks, I went to the other VCs. There's 4 VCs on the panel and me. I said, hey guys, is it just me, or does everybody do $1 million in their first year? And they all just burst out laughing. They said, you would be amazed at how many people come into our office and try to convince us that they're going to do $1 million in the first year, and they have absolutely no idea how they're going to get there from here. Well, here's the answer to that, because this is what's going to make sense. And as one venture capitalist in Silicon Valley asked me one day, and these guys are tough because they've seen it all. He looks at me and goes, Burke, show me something I can believe. Okay, so that's what this part is here. my example is boat anchors. Just pick something weird. So I got sailboat owner, and you're having market segments. So you want to have market segments here because you're going to have different kinds of customers. And so we got sailboat owners, powerboat owners, fishing boat owners, houseboat owners. You make this up as you go, but the idea is the example. So what I say here is, and I explain it right here, the total available market is, for example, I could show you, I could convince you, I could show you something out of Sailing Magazine, where Sailing Magazine will say we have 350,000 paid subscribers. So when the investor does their due diligence to make sure that, well, this Burt guy just told me that his boat anchor business has got there's 350,000 sailboat owners in the world who he could sell this boat anchor to. Is he lying to me? Is he making this stuff up, or is he for real? Well, they go look at Sailing Magazine. They see 350,000. We could either advertise there, we could buy their mailing list, whatever. But 350,000 is a real number. Okay, yay! Show me something I can believe. So that's what you fill in here. This is not dragging a graph to make something look pretty because you can't substantiate it. So that's the point here. And the next thing is, okay, so this is how many boat owners there are in the world. And they might argue and say, no, there's not that many powerboat owners. There's not many of these. But it doesn't blast your whole model. It just kind of tweaks one of the lines, which isn't going to blow up everything. The next box, even though a lot of people want to say, well, I'm going to sell 1,750 of these boat anchors to sailboats. Well, how do you arrive at that? Well, what I want you to do is start thinking in terms of market share. This is how investors see it. This is how a lot more sophisticated business people see it, is they start thinking in terms of what market share can I get? What's a believable market share? And you might say, well, I can get 1/2 of 1%. That's what this example is. And I can say, I think I can grow our reach of that by 5%. And you can see that each one of these going out is growing the previous one by 5%. So you're seeing a growth in market share, and that will show you a growth in number of customers who buy, and you'll end up with a number of customers, an accumulating customer base, presuming you don't lose any, but and new customers every year. And this also presumes repeat purchases of something. So boat anchors in this case might not be a good idea, but if you've got a subscription-based product like I do, it certainly makes sense because they stick around. I might be starting with 10,000 people already, in addition to all the new people I'm going to attract. So that's a possibility. You can put that in. And then we have the different products themselves. And so this, I put Graham's big idea. So I was talking to a guy in the UK named Graham. But the idea here is you have back on your assumptions page, you've got the names of all your products or profit centers or whatever you want to call them. So these are some ideas we give you. So if you're in the food business, you might use these. In your retail store, you might use these. If it's a technical thing, you've got something else, an internet service, something else. So we give you some ideas. I never want to leave you hanging with not knowing what to say or do. So we have Graham's product name in here. That's just to show you where that came from. Anyway, but it automatically fills in here because otherwise you'd have to fill in this product everywhere. So why do that? We do it for you. So now we say, what's the probability of purchasing this product? Well, half the people are going to buy this product, the sailboat owners. And then how many does that translate into units sold? Translates into sales, translates into, a number that's not $1 million a year. You have to play. When you play with this with your numbers, it'll be a lot more interesting to you and certainly make a lot more sense because it'll be your stuff. Ooh, I'm making money here. It's rocking. And you'll see how it works. So you can see this is how you convince these investors how you got to that $1 million at the end of the year, in this case, $2.5 million. So so the rest of this model is, this is just the other one. I advise you to, or suggest that you open them up and look at these and kind of go through it and click on the panels across the bottom. This is your startup capital requirements. And this is basically a giant shopping list of all the stuff you think you need to buy, do, or have to launch this business. And so there's a bunch of stuff in here, and you'll be able to see at the bottom of this thing how much money each month is it going to take to do this. So it looks like we need $283,000. But so what happens is you don't necessarily need the money, up front. You might need might need 6 months worth and to get it all in there, but you don't need it all in January is the point. Anyway, I'm not going to go through this model a whole lot more because there's just it's a big model, and it's really, it's, like I said, with your numbers and your products in it, it's going to be a heck of a lot more interesting. I do want to show you something briefly here, though, where one of the things we asked for in the management team section of the business plan is, do you have some advisors? Is Susie going to be your advisor? And, because the investors want to know, well, you've got some people out there who aren't necessarily employees or on your team, but there's someone you can call in a pinch. Something happened, something went wrong, I need to hire somebody, what do you think of this idea? You want some advisors. And so these advisors add a lot of credibility to your plan, because some of these advisors could be very important people, or very knowledgeable people. And the fact that you've convinced Damon John to join your organization, you're going, wow, you guys must have something right, because you got the shark from the Shark Tank on here, and this guy knows what he's talking about. How do you invite Damon John to be on your board of advisors? Well, we've got a letter for you. And so I'm showing you the template here. Again, the green is, hold harmless. Why would anyone accept your offer if they felt that it's some kind of risk because you use their advice? Take that fear away. If Damon says do this and the whole thing goes to hell in a handbasket, it's not his fault. It's yours because you went with it. But you're taking that responsibility. I don't think he would ever do that. But that's not a problem. Comments go away. Clean looking letter. You can click on this to edit it. And then when you go to fill in the blanks, you simply click that. Most of the information is already in here. It is September. I can't believe it. What is today? 3rd? I don't know what day it is today. 3rd, whatever. 2021. And you'll start to see how this thing starts to fill in. There it is there. And I'll put in someone's first name. Where are we? Address your first name, dear Ron. And so it starts filling it. Ron fills in here. Down at the bottom, Ron fills in. So, we're just eliminating typing as much as possible. Now what you have is you've got a reusable template that once you get this thing dialed in, you see I've got copies of it here. Well, it'll save it out. You'll have like copy, and you can rename these all you want. And then what you've got is these reusable templates. You just make this board of advisor template once, and you send it out to a bunch of advisors. And then when those are all set in concrete, you've got them done here. And these ones here, you can, of course, read them, but you can't edit them anymore because they're done. I never really completed them, this example with this guy. But you can see you can print it. You can email it to somebody. You can email it to whatever you want to do. And so that's built into the system. And so there's that. The investor presentation. Let me show you that briefly because I know that's going to be near and dear to your heart at some point. It'll take a moment to load. It's a PowerPoint template that I've uploaded. And the idea here is that you can get good looking, great looking, in fact, pitch decks online for free. You can get Airbnb, you can get Uber, you can get all the name brand pitch decks at different places. The only issue with that, and while they're pretty and I would get them and look at them, is they don't tell you what they did. They aren't explaining to you how this pitch process works. How do you do the proverbial 20-minute investor pitch? And so that's what this template is showing you. So we're giving you lots of instruction up here. And then the thing is, the problem is, and we tell you about, here's what you're explaining the problem. You want to quantify that problem because that way the investors can get an idea of, wow, there's a lot of customers out there for this thing, and these guys are in pain or they have a need and they're interested, and okay, I'm with you. And then the product or service. Here's something I'll tell you that it's not written in most people's business planning books or other products, is simply, I can't tell you how many times I've seen it where in a 20-minute pitch, the candidate the entrepreneur will spend 15 minutes selling the investor the product. Here's the thing, and I put this in green right here. The investor does not want to buy your product. The investor wants to invest in your company. So you want to give this product pitch briefly here. You can see there's more slides to go, and we got 20 minutes. And so you just want to tell about the product here, and they can find out more about it later. But it's the difference between selling a can of Coke and a Coke machine. It still sells Coke, but they want to know about the machine, not the Coke. Anyway, I'll move on. So what's the value proposition? Like what's the real big benefit here to these people? It's just like, wow, here's what they're going to get. and who's our typical customer who's going to jump into this thing, and a little bit about them, a little demographic, maybe the avatar about that customer. What are the advantages you have? What unfair advantage? This is kind of like the why from us part. Like what prevents competitors from steamrolling you out? And then you want to have your competitive position. And what you want to do is you see the orange text on the side and the bottom. You want to adjust those. Now, I talked to you about adjust the axes in orange so that when your company, you want to have your company high and to the right where it's all by itself because it's going to be high quality, low cost, all that kind of stuff. You want to talk about how you've really differentiated your company and you want to show it visually. And then the business model overview is basically how are you making money, subscriptions, sponsorships, whatever else. How does this thing make money? Who is working with you? Channel partners means retail channel, distribution channels, all that. There are 3 ways to the top of an oak tree. 1, you can sit on an acorn. 2, you can climb a ladder. Or 3, you can make friends with a big bird. These are your big birds, okay? Now, they want to know, okay, we're this far. What have you done so far? What have you done with what you got? You don't want to start out. I used to lead a business plan course at a prominent investor conference. And, everybody would say, well, so what do you need next? We'd always ask, what do you need next? And everybody would say, I need capital. I need money. I need money. And thinking, well, do you have business cards? Do you have a business plan? Do you have they would just always lead with, I need money. And I'm thinking, no, there's a lot of things you can do. And I've got a video, and you'll get a link to it, where I talk about all the things you can do to build your business without money. And part of what this really shows the investor is that what can you do without money? And you're a shrewd person. You can do all this stuff without money. I wonder what you could do if you had some. So that really is attractive to investors to see how shrewd you are. In fact, I tell a story on the business plan page. I should put it up here. But there's a guy. He came to us years ago, and he was a young guy. He was a jet pilot, and he had some friends, and they wanted to raise capital to buy a Learjet to start a jet charter service. Well, you can imagine. Learjet ain't cheap. They're millions of dollars. And, he went to some investors and they just said, there just isn't the return on investment on a jet. But, and I told him, I said, do you know a guy who owns some jets? And sure enough, he found a guy who owned 2 Learjets. He went to him with his presentation and said, I could manage your jets. We'll fly you around anywhere you want to go, but I can also lease them to other people and charter it to them, and we can make you some money. And so the guy's like, yeah, you can have my jets. Now, it doesn't get any better than that. Here's the guy, instead of going and having to raise millions of dollars, he gets a couple of Learjets from a guy who's got them. Now, take that story and apply it to office space, a vehicle, inventory. There's a whole bunch of stuff, raw materials, a whole bunch of things you could probably get or use. If you got the right presentation to show them, they'll say, take my jets and, fly those. And now how much money did the guy need to get? He just needed uniforms and some brochures and an office at the airport. He didn't have to spend millions of bucks on a couple of jets. So I think that's really a telling story, but it's a heck of a lesson. Anyway, what's the money look like in this deal? How much money are you making? Well, you saw that before. This is going to lead to the answer to the question, what's this deal worth? You don't really pitch what it's worth here in this presentation. This is to get everybody excited about, what you're doing and who's going to buy it, how big it can get, and how competitive you are, what an awesome product you have, what a solution you have, and the value proposition. And now we're at who's going to run this thing. So who are these people behind this business, and where have they been, and what experience do they have? And some businesses, this business has never been done before. But if you take people like Uber, for example, you take somebody maybe from the taxi business, somebody from the electronics business, something from different things, and you put them together, and now you've got a team of people that can do the thing that's never been done before. And I've been talking, again, back to this panel I was on. There was a panel of, you'll see this in the video, where I talk about the management team. And we didn't use the word diversity at the time, but in 2013, I recorded the video of my experience in 2005 on this panel of investors. And there's this panel of like 5 young white guys pitching this golf thing. And that was fine. They were all fraternity brothers and yada, yada. But I said, wait a minute, guys. You got Tiger Woods, who's coming up in the golf, business. I don't know what years and timing it was exactly. You've got a whole bunch of women that play golf, and you're just a bunch of guys. You've left out half the population. Women play golf too, and and every time I've ever driven by, I'm not much of a golfer, but every time I see golfers, most of them are over 50, let alone over 30. So I'm thinking you guys are missing out on a whole bunch of people who are really big customers for your service and your product, and you don't have any representation here. You really need to have those people because I want their perspective, I want their input, their ideas, all that stuff. It just makes sense. So that whole thing, we talk about diversity in there and why it makes sense. And today, finally, it's mainstream in a whole big way, which is healthy. So anyway, I just want to jump in. I've been talking about this for a long time. The next part is these advisors and directors that I told you about, who are they? Are these, famous people of some kind? Is Damon John here? Is Mr. Wonderful on here? These guys see something that maybe we don't see yet, but if they see it, maybe we should give it a serious look. And then how much money are you looking for? What ideas do you have on how you're going to pay it back? One of the things we talk about in here is there's a convertible note. There's also the idea of revenue shares, revenue royalties. A lot of these investors these days are getting old. And how to put that nicely, but they're getting old. And so they don't have the time to wait for you to sell your company or go public because they're getting old and they want to get some money back sooner than later. So you could say to them, and I did this with one of my investors, I said, I'll give you a half a point of my top line revenue in years 6 through 10. And I've got a link that you can use that would help you calculate not only a loan, an investment, as well as a revenue royalty as part of the thing. So if they gave you $1 million and you paid them back 1% of your revenue for years 6 through 10, that's how they start getting their money back. And then it's a little more complicated than that, but the idea is you're paying them back out of your sales. You're not giving them ownership in your company, is the point. And of course, everybody wants to know, what are you going to do with the money? Well, use the proceeds and you show them how this is going to play out. You can do that. And then this is kind of unnecessary, but I added it anyway. Like, okay, how do you get out of this thing and how do we get our money back? Well, this is how we do that. Here's your revenue share idea in here. And then you summarize the whole pitch deck. And then the last slide you leave up, your logo's here, your name, phone number, and email's here. And I would recommend summarizing 3 highlights of what this business is about, just so it's always on screen behind you while you're answering investors' questions. And one last thing I'll say about investor presentation, they'll interrupt you throughout it. I've never seen an investor presentation go more than about 2 slides before somebody said, hey, what about this? And in a way that's a good thing, because if they're interrupting you and asking questions, they're interested. I've never asked questions about a product I wasn't interested in. I was like, who cares? But if they're interested, they're going to ask questions. And so you might know later on you're in a slide you're going to address. You say, I'm going to address that in 2 more slides. Hold your horses. But you'll have answers. And that's really the main thing, is we want you to have the answers. And that really brings us to pretty much everything you need to know about business planning, using this for business planning, this tool you have in front of you, and all of the stuff you can do with it. And again, there's answers to questions under here that'll be useful, not necessary right away. This is a panel of blog posts, mostly written by me at the moment, but talking about different kinds of, this missionary or mercenary is an interesting story. I talk about that in a video. But there's just a lot of background information I hope you find interesting and useful, and that should help you out a lot with this process.